Welcome back to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm your midday host, Julie Grant, and it's great to have you along with us on this Friday as we continue our gavel-to-gavel coverage of the case of Kentucky versus Kit Martin. He is a former commercial airline pilot, also a retired Army Ranger. He served for 30 years. Now he is standing trial for 3 homicides. He is accused of murdering 3 of his next-door neighbors. This case has a very bizarre, convoluted set of facts, but this is what we know. We're in day number 2 of this trial. The state began their case yesterday morning with some testimony of, this morning, I should say. They started their case this morning with the testimony of the son of 2 of the victims. Yesterday, it was the sister of one of the victims who began testimony. But today, the focus, Matt Phillips, the son of Cal and Pamela Phillips, 2 of the victims this morning. He testified, this is him right here on the stand, very, very emotional at some points. And the cross-examination was really quite illuminating as well. Let's take a quick listen to some of what he said on direct.
He said, "Have you spoken to your parents today?" I said, "No." Odd question, but he knew me from growing up. So he said, "I need you to look at this on my phone, and we're going to need to talk afterwards." And so what I witnessed or viewed on his phone from the Courier-Journal was pictures of my childhood home with police tape around it. The back of my mother's car, it had been burned. In that article, there wasn't a lot of information, but it said that there was a body in the house that was found and also in the car. So at that time, we only knew 2 victims and we didn't know anything.
While court is on that recess, let me bring in someone who's watching this trial very closely for us from the courtroom, Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae. She's live in Kentucky with the latest. Julia, good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, to you.
Good afternoon, Julie. It has been quite a day inside the courtroom with those 2 witnesses taking the stand. We're expecting more after lunch. This jury is honing in on everything that they're saying, and we heard a lot of emotion today. We heard emotion yesterday from the sisters of the victim, but hearing from Matt Phillips and how he learned of his parents' death and the limbo that he was in for a couple of months, waiting to know if his mother was in fact the person who was inside that burned car. Just really difficult testimony coming out from the witness stand today.
Thinking about the position that Matt Phillips is in, I think anybody watching him would understand the heartbreak and the despair that anyone would go through losing both of their parents in such a violent way and being on that quest for justice. So, I know my heart was breaking as I was watching him testify. And of course, looking at this objectively from the defense perspective, the cross-examination explored that motivation to find his parents' killer and really shed some light for the jury on how this investigation eventually came to fruition. Talk to us about that cross, please, Julia.
Well, this is a defense position on this, that the motivation behind getting people involved and the push that this family did for justice somehow marred the investigation because of their zealousness and wanting to find justice and find a killer, and that they were focused on Christian Martin as that killer. So we heard today the defense really pulling out that information about the Attorney General at the time, Andy Beshear being someone who was talking to Matt Phillips about his parents' case. I noticed one of the jurors actually wrote down that information on a notepad when that information came out in court. Basically, that's the governor of this state now, and we know from defense filings that they list this as, or characterize this as, a political investigation in the way that it happened around the time that Governor Beshear was first deciding to run for governor, and that this announcement that he made as Attorney General of the arrest of Christian Martin is somehow motivated or connected to the family pushing and wanting this to move forward at that time.
Yeah, this is really just heartbreaking. 2 quite different positions. We have the state and the defense taking on this one. The defense adamant about Christian Martin's innocence. Let's play a clip from an interview with Christian Martin's mother, Jane. Let's take a look.
I think it's absolutely tragic. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible thing to happen. But what bothers me more than anything else is that whoever did this is still out there. And I hope everybody would realize that. Because whoever they are, they're pretty dangerous people.
And Julia, it's my understanding you were the one who interviewed Jane Martin, the defendant's mother. Tell us more about what she shared with you, please.
I asked her there that answer that she gave about how she felt about being in the courtroom with the victim's family. There was a moment yesterday where they were accidentally placed on the same side and mingled in the courtroom behind the state prosecutors, and then the defense attorney had to come and escort them over to the defense side. Just what her reaction is, knowing that this is why her son is on trial, because these three people were so brutally murdered, and it's been a mystery for many years of how it happened. So her reaction is, yes, her heart goes out to this family, and that she does think that this is a crime that needs investigation, but she was adamant that her son could not do this. She even said that when she was told that her son had been arrested, not even knowing the charges or the details, just the very idea of it sent her into the hospital with heart issues for several days. So really hard on this family, but they continue to support Christian Martin during this process.
It's my understanding he even has an alibi that could be presented, that he was home at the time with his current wife. And speaking of wives, or I should say maybe sort of wives, we know he was married, or thought he was married, to a woman named Joan Harmon, and turns out Joan Harmon is a bigamist. She was married to someone else at the time that she became married to the defendant, so their marriage was not, in fact, lawful, although he believed it was. And we know he also spoke out saying, even before the murders, he spoke out saying that when he wanted to divorce her, she threatened to ruin his life, said she knew she could, said she wanted to. I understand, Julia, that you also asked his mother about Joan Harmon and the marriage. We want to play a little clip of that now.
Can you talk about his marriage to Joan Harmon?
In plain English, that was the catalyst of the whole thing from day one, was the marriage with her. And of course, they weren't really married anyway, which he didn't know. And we tried to make her feel one of the family, but eventually we began to realize that this was just, it was not right. Things that were said were not right.
Can you characterize any of those? What type of things or incidents would come up during the marriage, maybe even early on?
I don't know, just had an uncomfortable feeling that something wasn't honest with her. That's the best I can say. There were too many stories that didn't jive, and just, no, it was obvious after a while that things were really not right there.
And Julia, we understand that Christian Kit Martin's position was that Joan Harmon also falsely accused him of sexual abuse with respect to her. She has 3 children. And he maintained his innocence with respect to that as well, and said that was retaliatory for threatening the divorce. Am I getting this all correctly?
You are. That's the court-martial proceeding that we've talked about. It's one of the reasons that the prosecution is alleging that Christian Martin killed Calvin Phillips, because he was going to be a witness for Joan Harmon in this court-martial proceeding against him, because he was in the military, so that's where this proceeding was, there on Fort Campbell's base. You know, that there's a line that the defense attorney used in the opening statements. He said, she told him that I will ruin your life and I know how to do it. And then he turned and looked at Christian Martin and said, and she did. She actually carried out ruining his life. I noticed one of the female jurors on this jury really looking almost scared, terse, when she heard that line, seeming to connect with it and be almost fearful that that is a position that someone could be in, that someone threatens to ruin your life. And now he is sitting at the defense table.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, and speaking of that, I know we were communicating off camera during the trial, but I want you to share this with our viewers. viewers too, please, Julia, with the former, I don't know if I should even call her wife or somewhat wife, Joan Harmon, who's going to be a witness, we understand, in this case. Maybe she was in the gallery, right? She was in the gallery. And talk to me about what she did when her name came up.
Right. Actually, I want to clarify, and
Sure.
here's why it could be confusing because of all the marriages involved. Not Joan Harmon. It was his first wife that is in the gallery supporting him. A woman named Stacy, who he was married to before he married Joan Harmon. And really, she was there to support him. The defense called her out during the opening statements, really to indicate this is not a bad guy. His ex-wife is here supporting him, knowing that he is innocent. Joan Harmon is not someone you would expect to be sitting on the side of the defense. If she's called, she may either be called as a prosecution witness to clear up the fact that the defense is going to say that investigators should have looked at her more closely, that she had more connections to this possible crime. And we also know that the defense would want to call her as a witness if she is not called as a prosecution witness. So she is not in the courtroom, but his first wife, who he married before Joan Harmon and before the wife that he is married to now, is the one who was in the courtroom, waved at the jury. You saw a lot of smiles at the defense table, and they're from the gallery during that introduction that the defense made during opening statements.
Oh, I appreciate that clarification so much, Julia. That's big. That says a lot. And with respect to Joan Harmon, too, I remember defense counsel pointing out in open about the fact that the way these charges are put forth, they're alleging complicity. So leaving open the possibility that more than one person was part of this, not directly pointing the finger solely at the defendant. And it seemed to me so stunning when defense counsel brought up the fact that Joan Harmon suddenly found the phone of Pamela Phillips and took it to an AT&T store to be unlocked.
This was huge information. Not sure how the jury takes it because they were just hearing all of this information at the same time for the first time. We've known bits and pieces that we learned through court documents and what investigators have released, but there's a lot of information that was sealed in this case. So the defense put out in opening statements that that phone of Pamela Phillips was found many weeks after her death. They couldn't locate it. And where it was ultimately located was in the front yard of Joan Harmon. And she seemed to charge up the phone, according to the defense, that she took it to the AT&T store to try and get it unlocked. And AT&T was the one who contacted the authorities because they recognized it as a stolen phone, or it did not belong to the person who was bringing it in to unlock it.
Wow. Is that such a great coincidence, or was that by design? That will be for the jury to decide. Julia, Janae, always great information from you. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring in now our legal analyst on the program today and every Friday, criminal defense attorney Joe Tamburino, standing by live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Joe, always great to have your legal expertise. This case is a doozy. Tell me what you think so far of the state's presentation, and in particular, what did you think of the son and his testimony today, please?
Good afternoon, Julie. Thank you for having me on. Absolutely, this case is a doozy. This is a great case to cover. First of all, the son, it was very powerful, and I think the state's case so far is good. But I have to say, the defense, I think, has good arguments. And this case, the two pieces of evidence that I'm so fascinated about is, number one, the shell casing, because remember, that was found much later on. And number two is the phone, Pamela's phone. I think those two pieces of evidence, or lack thereof, we could say, of how they're connected, really good evidence in this case. We're going to see how it unfolds.
I'm with you there. You know, that shell casing, it's a strange set of circumstances. And the other thing that's tough about it, we know here on Court TV Network that the defense wanted to introduce the fact that this relative, Diana Phillips, who was the first witness called by the state, the sister of the victim, Calvin,
Pamela.
She failed a polygraph test. In talking about this, I mean, when they brought it forward to investigators, this discovery, and then failed the lie detector test, but the jury can't know about that. As a defense attorney, how frustrating is that when you're fighting what seems like an uphill battle, and perhaps, I mean, the defense is of the position that Kit Martin is being framed. So how tough is it when you get a ruling like that, that this big critical piece of evidence was discovered by somebody who has some motivation to get justice for their loved one and also was perceived to not be telling the truth?
Well, that's a great point, because what you just said, motive, under the Kentucky rules of evidence and their case law, I believe one of the cases is the Prim case, motive and bias is always relevant. So what you just said is completely true. When you have people, witnesses, who have motives to lie, motives to fabricate, motives or bias to frame someone, that's really powerful evidence. And think about Ms. Harmon in this case. I mean, this is just a treasure trove of bias because she committed the crime of bigamy. I mean, you can't do that. So there's going to be so many great pieces of evidence and impeachment in this case.
I'm with you. Joe Tamburino, thank you so much for all of that. You're going to stay with us. We want much more analysis from you.